Welcome to the Extraordinary Lives of Ordinary People. Today we're talking to Mr. John Rosenbaum. He will be discussing drug abuse and, in some cases, how crystal meth can lead to becoming a tax accountant. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Pete.
Now, you are somewhat of a normal family guy.
Yep, I got a wife and a cat.
And your childhood, was there any severe dysfunction?
Nothing outstanding. Just, I grew up in the classic family. Both parents married. I have 3 siblings, and I went to a private school.
So at what point did the lure of drugs and alternate realities start to kind of pique your interest?
When I was in high school, I was super against drugs. Not for any noble purity reasons or whatever, or legal reasons. But I just thought doing drugs was a waste of brain cells. You lose so many brain cells a day anyway, why make it worse? But then I went to college, and that changed things.
How so?
Well, my roommate was, your typical college partier, and I just got sucked into it and kind of fell in love with the lifestyle. I didn't go too crazy at first, but I did become a really big pothead, but otherwise didn't mess with other stuff. That wasn't until later.
And what was your major at the time?
I was a biology major, but school didn't really hold my interest. I didn't see the point of spending all my time to get good at grades, to get a good job, to make a lot of money, to die. So I dropped out of school, started doing some network marketing stuff, but didn't really throw myself behind that either. I just thought, I just didn't see the point of giving it all for things that weren't going to last. And so I fell into a really deep depression fueled by marijuana.
In that case, was it, quote, a gateway drug?
Well, actually, I'd say alcohol is more of a gateway drug. One night in college, I got drunk, and then the next night was the first time I smoked weed. In this depression, really deep depression, I was just searching for some sort of meaning, something deeper to hold on to, and I couldn't find it. But what I did find was ecstasy, and that was a rush. That was a good way to get all the feelings that I was lacking. So, so I started doing a lot of ecstasy. It was great because I felt good. I was able to kind of say the things that were on my mind and heart to my friends that I didn't think I could say unless we were all on ecstasy.
All right.
So I got the community friendship that I was looking for. And it got really bad. I was doing several pills a night, several nights a week, for about 8 months. None of my friends actually started calling me this. I was looking for them to start calling me John E. Ecstasy. But anyway, so I did a lot of ecstasy and was miserable. It got to the point to where I had to snort pills just to feel normal, which obviously is not a good place to be. So to get off ecstasy, I started doing cocaine.
Sounds logical.
Yeah. The whole time, though, that I was doing this, I was searching for that deeper meaning that I knew had to be there. Just thought there had to be more to life.
And at any point, did these forays into drugs, did that actually give you any clues at that point?
Well, I guess to back up a little bit, I was raised in a Christian home, an evangelical home, if that means anything to you. But I had rejected the idea of God when I was 12. It just didn't make sense. And even though I went through high school at a Christian school, I just got stronger in my resolve that there was no thinking behind the idea of God. It just felt very made up. It just seemed like seemed like God was a crutch for weak people. Come to find out, I'm one of the weakest people I know. So I dropped out of school, super depressed, got my taste of ecstasy, but then I wound up becoming a Christian at some point while I was living on my parents' couch. And I got this idea in my head that Christians are supposed to be little Christ. And I thought, well, Jesus was homeless for the poor. My deeper purpose in life must be to be homeless for Jesus, to go spread community the way Jesus did, on foot with no money. And of course, that was a really scary idea, to be a wandering homeless guy trying to tell people about some figure that they already have heard about, So I didn't do it. I kept not going, and so then I kept feeling like I was basically living in sin for not doing this thing that I felt I was called to do. And of course, in all this, I'm smoking a lot of weed, so looking back, I don't think I was thinking right about it.
Marijuana is notorious for upping people's motivation.
Right. No kidding. So that depression got deeper, both from guilt and from weed, and so it was a vicious cycle. So then feeling like I was in this constant state of guilt, I that's when the ecstasy phase kicked in, kind of getting myself away from that. But then I just started getting angry. I was like, well, if I'm doomed to hell because I'm living in sin, because I won't do what God told me to do, and God's not giving me the oomph to go do it, well, then it's God's fault that I'm going to hell, so fuck you. And then, so I gave God the finger and actually got into Satanism.
Is there bipolar in here somewhere?
So, probably would imagine. But yeah, I figured, okay, well, I'm aware of the spiritual realm. I'm kicked off the good team. Well, I may as well take advantage of this awareness and play for the other side. Of course, that didn't work out too well. Drove me deeper into the ecstasy phase. Wanted to be off of that, so I used cocaine to wean myself off of that. And that was my cocaine phase was a short phase, just a couple months. Because then I just got into crystal meth. Because with crystal meth, I was able to do the things that I had always wanted to do. I had the energy to learn to skateboard, and I had the energy to make music with my friends, and we would play for 2 days straight. Yeah, but that was a miserable time. And this whole time I lived with my parents. I was mostly couch surfing if I was sleeping at all. But, and I was actually fairly open with my parents about everything I was going through since the beginning. They knew I was on ecstasy. They knew I was doing cocaine. They knew I was on crystal meth.
So when you say it was a miserable time, was there like a rock bottom moment there?
There was a rock bottom moment. There were a few building up to the rock bottom moment. Those were my sister and I used to be really close, and I remember there was just this one incident. We were in my parents' garage, and I just blew up at her. And even though things are different in my life now, I felt like we've actually never quite recovered from that. My normal weight is about maybe 180, 190, but I was down to 135. Gray skin, baggy eyes. The smell of food would make me throw up. Thinking about food made me throw up. I was awake for maybe 10 days, hadn't eaten maybe 2 weeks, and felt myself dying in my shower. So that was almost rock bottom.
Right.
After that was my first real serious search to find my way out. And again, my parents, they knew about everything I was going through. They kept trying to help me through all this. All of this downward spiral stemmed from my understanding of God and what I felt God wanted from me. So they tried to hook me up with all these pastors and missionaries and stuff to try to set me straight. But of course, they were all wrong. None of them knew. That's what I thought at the time. Looking back, I see that there were elements that they were right about, but by just saying, no, you're wrong, they didn't acknowledge any part that I knew was right. So I'm the only Christian in the world, but not really, because I'm a Satanist.
A little bit of conflict of interest there.
A little bit. Okay, so rock bottom. So that dying in the shower moment was when I was like, okay, I really need to change something. There was one last person that my dad was going to introduce me to. So there's this guy named Chris who worked with an organization called Youth with a Mission, or YWAM. Their story is they just basically hang out with homeless people. They bring water, they bring bread if they can get it donated. But they just go hang out with homeless people and prostitutes and drug dealers and their children.
Which was your initial goal to begin with.
Right. So when I met these guys, I felt this longing, just this excitement. Here are people that are doing what I wanted to do, but I wasn't quite ready for it. So I had this dying in the shower experience, and basically pleaded with my dad, I am ready. I need help. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, get a job or you're out of here. So I gave my dad the finger. Decided, my friend that I jammed with, we had just been offered from a drug dealer this opportunity to ship crystal meth from San Diego up to our town in California in the Central Valley, and he'd pay us $500 each every time we made the journey, and he was going to give us our first guns to start off until we can afford our own. So I said, screw you, Dad, and I'm going to take this guy up on his offer.
You told him that I'm not going to go get a job, but I'm going to run crystal meth instead?
No, I didn't actually tell him. Just resolved to do it. And I had this fear of having to shoot people, right? Because if you're going to be a drug dealer, you have to be willing to kill people. And I didn't feel like I was willing to do that. So I decided, all right, as soon as I get my gun, I'm going to just go find somebody and kill them just to numb myself of the experience, just so I'll be able to do it when I need to do it. And that sucks. Resolving to do that was rock bottom.
Right.
That was when I realized I'm sick of this. My friend dropped me off in my car. We were going to go meet up back at his place, smoke some more crystal, then drive down to San Diego for our first run. But as I was driving to his place, I just was stopped at the stoplight. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and I just started bawling, just realizing how shitty that was, that I did not want to be that person. I don't want to be the guy that kills people. You know, I hate what that stuff did in my life. Why would I want to be the cause of this misery in someone else's life and sell it? That's when I decided I'm done. So instead of turning right and going to meet my friend, I turned left to go meet up with the YWAM guys I mentioned, Chris and his partner Jimmy. I went to go talk to Jimmy. So 10 o'clock at night, I go knock on his door. I'm a mess. I've been crying. My pupils are huge because I had just smoked some crystal. But he still met me where I was. We went outside and just talked for like 2 hours. And he, instead of just telling me I was wrong like the other pastors did, he asked me why I thought what I thought and was able to help me see through the muddied thinking. And that changed everything. I resolved that night to be a disciple of Christ by being a disciple of Jimmy, and haven't looked back. I went home that night and did tell my dad everything. I told him my resolve that I had made before, and this new commitment, and that things are truly going to be different now, because I finally saw, like you said, people that are doing what I wanted to do, and I could be a part of that. And so I did. I mean, it was a long journey, but at that point, started working with this team 20 hours a week, just hanging out downtown with homeless people.
What were some of the more notable events there of working with the homeless and hanging out with these people?
To be a little more clear about what I mean by hanging out with the homeless is I just mean being friends. Not trying to fix people, not trying to necessarily help them, being available to help them if they want it, but our goal was just to be friends. To suffer alone is to despair, but to suffer with a friend is to hope. That makes a lot of sense to me. The way Jimmy asked me questions and tried to understand where I was before helping me out made all the difference compared to those other guys who just from on high told me I was wrong. So I wanted to be that for people because that changes lives. Some sort of paying it forward, I guess. So I was working with these guys part-time, but I also had to get a job as a condition of staying at my parents' house. I started working in the coffee shop at the local Borders bookstore. And there's this homeless guy that came in every day, homeless Jim. And for the most part, people disregarded him. He was a dirty, grumpy guy who had his chair in the store. But he'd walk in every day just as the store opened, and he'd walk out just as it closed. So while I was working there, I just became his friend and, talked to him every day. And eventually he got to be a lot less gruff. I remember 2 incidences in particular that were really cool. The first, I was changing some milk containers out on the floor, and Jim walks up to me and says, check out those gimps. And, I looked, and there was a group of mentally handicapped people that came in, and couldn't believe that he said that. And I told him that. I was like, Jim, seriously? You don't say that. He didn't say anything immediately after. But like a month later, this one day, that same group of mentally handicapped people were in the store, and I saw Jim talking to one of them, this guy Carlos. And a little bit later, Jim and Carlos walk up to the counter, and Jim bought Carlos a coffee. I just thought that was really cool, just seeing change in Jim after just being his friend, and just like to think that maybe that had something to do with him choosing to be a friend to someone that he originally disregarded as unimportant. The second really cool story was, so at the time, my wife, she'd bring me lunch every so often and pack a little bit more for me to give to Jim. And it was Christmas. He walks up to me and says, I found $100 outside. Cool, man. What are you going to do with it? Take you and your wife to Boston Market. A day or 2 later, the 3 of us hopped into my truck and we went down to Boston Market, and he bought us dinner. It was really cool. It was really funny to see the cashier's expression, just the shock on her face, thinking that the money was going to come from one of our wallets, and it came from Jim's wallet.
So what are you up to nowadays? You spent some time with Youth with a Mission, and then you got married, and as I understand now, you're actually a tax preparer, and you did go back to school, and you got a degree in philosophy, and
yeah.
What's the future looking like for you? Where do you go from here?
So from here, I actually just last week officially confirmed that I am going to go to graduate school in philosophy at Baylor University, fully funded. So I'm going to go study philosophy in a PhD program and not have to pay a dime for it. In fact, get paid to do it, which is pretty cool. I'm interested in philosophy because the thing that messed me up, the search for meaningful existence. And I found that the most meaningful thing I could do, the most important thing I could do is be a friend, and in friendship, see how I can help somebody. And one of the best ways I've found to help is critical thinking. Clearly, I had a lack of critical thinking skills through my big mess. Delusions of the grandeur of homelessness for Christ and the requirement to do so. Christianity, Satanism hand in hand. I mean, obviously, something was askew in my thinking. So I think critical thinking skills are some of the best ways to help people who are in bad situations.
So you're still a follower of our Lord and Savior, Jesus H. Christ?
Yeah, Jesus H. Christ. Yep.
So, I mean, traditionally it seems there's the whole introspective thing is often at odds with religions in general because you have to ask some of the tough questions. So you find meaning and you find reward in taking your personal relationship with Jesus or as being a Christian and still willing to ask the tough questions, and you find peace and you find resolve with that?
I totally do. I was drawn into the Catholic Church for a lot of reasons, but a big part of it is their rich intellectual history. They're not afraid to ask tough questions.
Well, because the Pope, he's recently issued statements on aliens, and hasn't he lightened up on the whole gay marriage thing?
Pope Francis is a badass. As a Catholic, I don't know of any other Christian denomination besides maybe the Episcopals where you can be a gay supporting, evolution believing, alien hopeful person other than the Catholic Church. Of course you get different groups within the Catholic Church. Catholics aren't afraid of questions. Some of the greatest minds in Western history come from the Catholic Church. And that's another cool thing about philosophy is as I've grown in my critical thinking skills, I've become much more comfortable with uncertainty. I think a big part of what messed me up before was having to have absolute answers. Who is right and who is wrong? I mean, that was a big part of it. Oh, well, they're clearly not Christians because they're throwing out everything I think. There's just so much that we don't know, including a lot of things we can't know.
And so anybody that might be going through, similar circumstances, whether on drugs or not, feeling completely lost and devoid of meaning, what do you feel is the most important thing to cling to move forward?
That I can answer. 2 really important things were needed for me to get the life I wanted, basically, to get out of that spiral of death and into a life that I love. They are, first and foremost, community. Being with people who really care about me, who are committed to seeing me be the best version of myself and doing what they can to help me achieve that. And the second thing is giving back, service, helping people. In community, in friendship, I had the support I needed to where I could take my eyes off myself, stop worrying about what is going to bring meaning to my life, what am I going to do to spend my time, what's going to matter when I'm gone. In helping others, knowing that I had their support, I didn't have to look at myself because I knew people were there for me. And that allowed me to focus on helping others, to get involved with the YWAM group and spend my time sitting on a curb next to a homeless guy smoking a cigarette, neither of us saying a word, just so that guy knows that he's not alone. I think it's truly in service where we find our meaning.
Well, thank you, John. You're a heck of a nice guy. I'm glad to have gotten to know you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.